Hello, hello, welcome back. Yes, I'm about 5 minutes late, roughly around that. That happens sometimes, just trying to get things sorted out and also get my head in the right space because we're designing classes today. Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's a big one. It's not a small idea, it's a big idea. So, yes, that's part of the reason why. Uh, I have a poll. Feel free to take part in that poll. I'll put that up now. I suggest you grab some food, some drink, get comfortable. We have just under 2 hours to get this class done. Yes, I did some homework, so I have at least something to work with when I start. Don't you worry, I know how to do this sort of thing. Okay, let's get moving, shall we? Hi, welcome to How to D&D. My name is Fred Weller, and today I want to talk about Dungeons & Dragons. The game particularly that I want to focus on is Shadowdark, and Shadowdark is just a version of Dungeons & Dragons. That's really all it is. Okay, it's just not the brand name. This is a non-brand name, basically. We're going to look at the Warlock and the Hexblade. Now, the Hexblade is a subclass of the Warlock from Dungeons & Dragons 5e. And I thought it would be interesting and fun, since my players had mentioned they would like me to make one for Shadowdark, that maybe we'll have a go. We'll see if we can do that. So I'm going from this, very, much lighter version, less crunchy version, more rulings version of Dungeons and Dragons Shadowdark here, and I'm going to try and take the very crunchy, very heavily mechanical Xanathar's Guide to Everything has the Hexblade. So I went through the Hexblade and I looked at the Warlock that I had created already for Shadowdark to see if I thought I could do it. And I decided in the end that I thought I could. In the last 5 minutes, which is part of the reason why I'm a little bit late, I realized I had made a horrible mistake. I want you to pay attention to this. I'm going to point it out, not right this very second, but I had failed to realize a significant design factor when going from the core classes for Shadowdark, this system, then making my own Warlock class for Shadowdark, which for me is probably going to require, I think all classes need a good 5 to 10 years testing, which of course none of them have any of that, even the core ones. So I'm not completely convinced that, the Warlock that I created is actually that great. Not yet. Play testing more. It is being play tested and it'll continue to be play tested. But we won't know. I won't know the answer till 2035, whether I think it's where it needs to be. That's a long process. Although most designers don't think that way. They're not working on that scale. So the Hexblade is a difficult one. So what I normally do is I usually ask the audience how they would design the Hexblade. I do have some notes and I'm going to show that stuff to you. Okay. Here we go. Hashtag. How would you design the Hexblade class for Shadowdark RPG? And there are some very big questions to be asked. I knew they were going to be big questions to ask because Hexblade always sort of suggests magic blade or magic weapon of some kind. And that is sort of what the class is revolving around. That's essentially the aspect behind it. And as soon as you do that and you make that available at level 1 of all places, something like Shadowdark will suffer. There will be problems. Hello, Jasper. How you doing? So, what I've done is, look, in the description you'll find a product called the Player's Expansion for Shadowdark RPG on DriveThru RPG. Okay, on the website DriveThru RPG. It is pay what you want. You can pay nothing or you can pay something. It's up to you. I don't mind. Okay, I was the lead designer. The primary designer, lead designer, AJ Pickett was, Mitchell Reed, Wally DM did the layout, and the cover art was done by my brother. And I'm gonna have a look at that, and then I'm gonna show you the Hexblade and show you where the problems lie. So this live stream is going to be one of those times where I show you where trying to design something and actually get it to work has some really significant problems, because the last thing you want to do is make a class that's better than another class. Certainly making it better than another class that it's based off or is using the bones of it. That's a bad design, right? That is bad design. That is a failure on the design part. And that is something we need to consider. So we've done 3 of these so far. And I knew that eventually, as I was doing these live streams, since all of my design work before this, for the 10 classes that are in the player's expansion for Shadowdark RPG, was behind closed doors. Nobody knew what I was doing, really, other than AJ Mitchell and Wally and my brother David. So only they really knew what I was up to. But now I'm showing you that process so you can see where things get unhinged. Okay, so going down here, I started off with the bare bones of the Warlock that I had already created. So this is the Warlock here. So weapons, it had a series of weapons that I decided they would have. I'm already in the process with this Warlock looking at the longsword as being a problem. Having access to a longsword as a Warlock is a significant problem because of its damage output, potentially. And during playtesting, we've discovered this. And so then I've got leather armor, shields, okay. You've got your hit points, which is D6, which is actually quite a lot of hit points. It is equivalent to what you would get if you were playing a priest, right? And then you have languages. Am I showing you all this stuff? I hope, yeah, I am. Okay, languages, 1 extra language. So I've kind of toned it down from the wizard. Patron boons, you roll randomly for these. There are 12 in all, and they are based off the invocations, the Warlock's invocations from 5e. And what I've done, I've just broken them down to the core aspect. And then I added 2 things that were just bat nuts crazy, which is if you get a 2 or you get a 12. They are utterly nuts, not necessarily functionally overpowered, but just bat nuts crazy for a player character to have. And they're cool. And then we have Eldritch Blast, and only the Warlock does Eldritch Blast. But here's the thing, the Hexblade is kind of like a Warlock, but with a very different focus. So how do I do this? So what I did is I went through and I created a table for the Hexblade. I put in its key abilities. I decided that they should still have patron boons. Eldritch Blast still needed to be there. I've already discovered that the damage output at later levels from about level, I think we were deciding that maybe about level 5 or 6, 1d4 just isn't enough, particularly since the Warlock doesn't have patron boons that do damage. They're all utility features. So that means that quite often, if they're up close, you'd be better off to use a longsword, and if at range, D4 damage, even though most monsters don't have a lot of hit points, when you get to level 5 or 6, D4 is sort of like, well, I might as well just play a wizard. That's not actually true. What we've discovered is the Warlock is just really good at doing whatever they get really well. And Warlock people, people playing the Warlock I've found so far have wound up having lots to do. Like, they do not get bored, which is great. That's a good design factor. But they are certainly not combat machines like the fighter, which is definitely, the thief can be, and I would say the wizard also, combat machine at higher levels. Really, really good once they get to fireball, right? That being said, I think the priest is still the best class because they can cast cure wounds, basically. They can heal you, yeah? So Hexblade. So don't worry about this yellow bit here. So what I put in here is I decided, okay, if they're a Hexblade, let's try to stick to blades. Rather than let's just open up to every single weapon. Now, we can't really call it the Hexblade because that'll be IP. So I had to think a little bit about what I might decide to call this. And I was going to call it the Cursed Blade class. Maybe we could. If you come up with a better name, Cursed Blade. Cursed something. Cursed Warrior. I don't know. Something like that. We need to have a different name in here. Because I won't be able to just call it Hexblade and think that Wizards of the Coast would be happy with me. They won't be. So the next thing is, I was looking at this and I was thinking, okay, so I'm going to go Bastard Sword, Dagger, Great Sword, Great Axe, because it's got a blade to it, Great Sword, Long Sword, Short Sword, and Spear. They're all got blades to them in some way. And all the other weapons are more bludgeoning weapons. So they're things that you smack somebody with, and then you're done. Or you shoot them with, when I don't really want to give them a ranged weapon, because that's what Eldritch Blast needs to be doing. That needs to be doing the ranged stuff. Hence why you'll notice with the original Warlock that I was designing, how many ranged weapons do we have? Oh, we've got a crossbow. And I think the crossbow is a mistake on my part, but the crossbow, again, it doesn't do that much damage. Crossbow is a D6, so it's maybe another point of damage more than the Eldritch Blast, but you're probably going to be better at doing your Eldritch Blast than anything else. And then, of course, you could throw a dagger, but a dagger is just a D4, and it's not magical, so your Eldritch Blast becomes the most sensible thing to use. But I learned my lesson. I did not put crossbow in there, okay? You have to rely on the Eldritch Blast. And you need to rely on the fact that you are a melee character. You need to be up in front. So now that I was thinking about this, and I was thinking, all right, so now that I've got that, we've established that they're going to be near the front. What sort of stuff do I need to give them in terms of armor? Leather armor seemed like a reasonable thing to do, because I've done that already with the Warlock as such. Okay? But they are potentially a character that can be in the back line, whereas the Hexblade can't be in the back line. They have to be near the front. Yeah, they can't be in the back line. They have to be in the front. So this was my next problem, is do I give them chainmail? So I decided, yes, I'll give them chainmail, I'll give them shields. There's no dual wielding in Shadowdark, so I don't need to worry about that. I'll give them the hit points of 1d6 per level. It's not as good as a fighter. They do wear armor. It's about on par with, say, a priest. And you might say or mention, like, okay, but hang on, Fred, doesn't the priest have pretty good armor as well? Like, the fighter gets all armor and shields, and the priest gets all armor and shields. And I decided, no, I think with the Cursed Blade, or the Cursed Blade, or Cursed Warrior, or Hex Blade, or whatever the heck you want to call it, giving them all armor was a bad idea. And the reason being is, there's no opportunity attacks or attacks of opportunity in Shadowdark. You can move in and out of combat and melee. It's not a problem. Movement in Shadowdark is quite common. You can do that sort of thing. So I then looked at those aspects. So I knew I needed to give them some armor, but not the best armor under the sun, right? Otherwise, I need to, if I'm going to give them less armor and they're in the front line, then I need to give them more hit points. They need to go up to a D8 or a D10. But it's not going to be a D10 because they do wear armor, as far as I was concerned. So I thought chainmail and leather armor and shields was sort of the trade-off. The next thing is the key feature of the Hexblade has to be a magic blade. So I sat down and I rewrote this so many different times with so many different ways of doing it. So I wrote it down as this for now. Use your action. So you have to use your action, which means you don't get to attack, to touch one weapon and imbue magical energy into the blade with a DC 11 charisma check, which is essentially just a spell casting check in many respects for a charisma-based Hexblade, right? Because you're assuming that your charisma is going to be good, so that you can make a magic blade. Now, the weapon becomes magical and has +1 to attack and damage rolls for 3 rounds. Now, you'll know that there's only one spell in Shadowdark, if you've played the game, called, I think it's Holy Weapon? Is it Holy Weapon? That allows you to make a a weapon that is not magical, because there's no sort of magic weapon for the wizard in Shadowdark, but the priest has what is called Holy Weapon. So I looked at Holy Weapon as a spell, and I had to make sure that when I was making this magic blade feature, that it was not better than the Holy Weapon spell. Because remember, with a Holy Weapon spell, if I fail that as a priest, I can't cast it again. I can't do that again until I take a rest. Not only that, if I roll a 1 and really fluff it up, I have to pay penance. Now you might say those can all sort of you can get past those pretty easily. It's not a big deal. So I then had to look at Holy Weapon. Last 3 rounds, it is one of those spells which has got a range of close, so you have to touch. So I just wrote in the word touch. One weapon you touch is imbued with sacred blessings. The weapon becomes magical and has +1 to attack and damage rolls for the duration. Now this is 5 rounds. I've made it 3 rounds, and there's a reason why I have done this the way that I've done it. 1, it means you can imbue a weapon with magical energy, and I guess you might say it could be somebody else's weapon. It might not be your weapon that does the fighting. So we could even say this is magic weapon. We'll call it that. Make that easier. So use your action to touch one weapon and imbue magical energy into the Okay, so use your action to touch one weapon and imbue magical energy into the one weapon, and then imbue magical energy into the I feel like I've repeated myself. Weapon, might have to rewrite this, with a DC 11 charisma check. Okay, so it becomes magical. So I needed to make it less powerful than the Holy Weapon spell. So that is why I've done it that way. I looked at the difficulty class, which is essentially a DC 11 for a charisma, for a spellcasting check of Holy Weapon. So that is what I've done there. But here's the thing: it is not a spell as such, which means if you fail the check, you could retry it in the same day. Does that make sense? That is a very different sort of aspect, because here's the problem with having a Hexblade or a Cursed Warrior or a magical weapon wielding class, is if you lose the ability to do the one thing that defines your class the first time you try to use it, which is possible because it's a 20-sided dice roll, and you could screw it up, you could get less than 11, or you could roll a 1. If we have a huge penalty on your key feature, then your whole class means very little. And I didn't want to do that. Even with a wizard, even if a wizard has, terrible luck with their spellcasting checks, and, a wizard has only so many different spells they can cast, right? When you look at your wizard in Shadowdark, at level 1, you get 3 spells, but you've got 3 chances. So if you fail the first spell that you try to cast, you still got a second one you can try, and then a third one. But magic weapon is kind of, it's much more confined, because you don't cast spells as a Hexblade in Shadowdark, because my Warlock doesn't cast spells. The only spell they cast is Eldritch Blast, because that's what needs to define it from everything else. It is not like a wizard. It is not like a priest. It's a different animal. So I realized that I needed to be very careful about how I structured this. Magic weapon, there were a couple of things I did here. I structured it like there was no action to use it, and you could just make a weapon magical. I started off with it only applied to the Hexblade, and then I decided, okay, well, why can't we make it for other classes as well, other characters playing in your party? And then, so I tried many different ways of doing it. I don't know if this is the best way, but this is the way that I'm structuring it for now. And there are no, you can retry it, because it's the key thing that you do. but there's a chance that you will fail to do it successfully, and it lasts 3 rounds. Why 3 rounds? Most battles in Shadowdark are between 1 and 3 rounds. It is very rare to have 5 or more rounds in a battle. You really don't need it in Shadowdark, even at higher levels of play. I can guarantee you, because the maths is very different. Okay, next, patron boon. Choose a patron to serve or create one with your Game Master approval. See page 28 of the Shadowdark rulebook. The source of your supernatural power is your patron. You gain a new patron boon at even character levels. Now here's where I started to have problems. And you remember how I mentioned that when I was designing this, I only just recently, in the last, I don't know, half hour, realized I had screwed up. And that is, if I take away something like the languages from the Warlock that I gave to the Warlock and replace it with Magic Weapon. Magic Weapon is a combat feature. It's also probably, I would say, I think in reality it is probably viewed and probably much better than getting a language. Like this feature here is significantly better in many respects, particularly in the player's mind. Probably when it comes to combat, you can probably get by with not having an extra language, you know. It's a very situational thing. I like giving people more languages because I think it helps move away from blast it with magic, cut it down with a sword, and instead talk. And roleplay games there should be dialogue as well, right? So I think the weight on this is much greater than getting a language. But I didn't change the number of patron boons. The Warlock gets 12. And the Hexblade, I left it at 12. And that is the worst thing that I could have done. Having 12 different things is way too much. Way, way too much. I definitely need to cut that down to a much smaller, tidier, and I guess a bit more refined in some way, because this is not going to work. It's not going to work well at all, because unfortunately it means that the Warlock as a playable class is just not as good as playing the Hexblade. The Hexblade becomes the best option. And that is the thing I was mentioning, is like, this is where when you design something, you put it on paper and you think, okay, we're all good, this should work fine, let's go. And then you discover I made a terrible mistake. And that is the terrible mistake that I made, is I probably should not have done it that way. So I'm going to have to fix that. That means the table of boons needs to be significantly reduced to compensate for the fact that we have Magic Weapon as a main feature for our class. So when you're designing your own classes for Shadowdark or any other game system, always remember, if you make something that is better than another class that it's based off, you've made a mistake. If it winds up being the class that everybody goes to and is considered the best class to play, again, you've made a terrible mistake. So there has to be something that has, that narrative aspect, something that plays into what people want to experience as part of the game, but also it can't be the thing that everybody thinks is the best thing to play, because that's a bad way to design. Okay, so Eldritch Blast. To fire a beam of energy, make a spellcasting check by rolling a d20 plus your charisma modifier, which is why it's a charisma-based class. DC 11 to succeed. The beam does 1d4 damage within far range. If you fail your spellcasting check, you don't need to complete a rest to reuse the spell in the same day. Now, we could probably say that this here could be structured just like Magic Weapon. And I could structure it just as I did before. Like, I could take this sentence here, and probably I should. I find people who play 5e in particular, but who have played other versions of D&D, require every single little thing to be spelled out. Otherwise, they seem to lose their stuff. So sometimes it is best to okay, let's take this. I go here, copy, and okay, the weapon becomes magical and has a okay. Use your action to touch one weapon and imbue magical energy with. Now we'll take this here, and we'll just make it a spellcasting check rather than a DC check. With a spellcasting check by rolling a d. Yes. Okay, so that's that there. So that's the fundamentals of our magic weapon. Okay, so it is still like you are essentially casting a spell, but it is a spell that you don't need to worry about losing. But those are that's the only two spells they get. But this then goes back to we need to look at the patron boons, otherwise there's a huge problem. So there's a couple of things here that I did here in the talents table. First off, choose a talent. I made it choose a talent because I put that at the top because that is the thing that the players want the most to roll. Because this is random, right? And then the next most commonly desired thing is +2 to distribute to any of your stats because it gives you the most versatility and most control over the creation of your character's class. Okay, so that would be the next one. That's why they're at the two extremes. I did not put them together. Okay, I separated them out because I think that's probably the smartest way. Then 3 to 6 I put down as +1 to Eldritch Blast spellcasting checks. So I think we need to change this for this class to +1 to spell casting checks because they only have two spells, the Hexblade that they cast, and it's not like the Warlock that only had one spell that they cast. This one now has two, right? Next thing, I've put down here +1 to melee attacks with weapons. So I've been very specific because I was thinking, okay, am I going to wind up with people trying to do unarmed strikes and add a +1 to the melee? So let's make sure it's about weapons because the Hexblade is not about being able to do more damage by punching or kicking somebody. So let's eliminate that. That's why I put it in with weapons. And then DTM 10 to 11 I put here +1 to melee damage rolls with weapons. I've separated them. They don't get, it's not boxed in like, with a fighter, you get quite a lot more. So I've separated those a lot more, and I've done that quite deliberately. Because remember, you have the opportunity to use a magic weapon. Something that the fighter is not going to get, because in Shadowdark, you really shouldn't be picking up a magic weapon till about level 7. Unless, of course, you're a fool and you design it and you don't look at how the structure of monsters and characters are supposed to be aligned. It explains in the book, right, how you're supposed to give out treasure. Level 7 and you got level 1 to 10. That's the range. Like, fighters aren't going to see a magic weapon for a long time. So as a Hexblade, you've got a huge advantage over them. Just as a priest has a huge advantage over the fighter because they can make their weapon magical if they need to do so. Particularly if they're fighting something that can't be hurt unless you're using a magical source, right? That's one of the factors. So that's why I have structured it that way. But as I said, this is my problem, is there are too many options here. We have to get rid of some of this. The Hexblade patrons effects cannot be as many as this. This is way too much. So that means trimming back. Otherwise, it's better than the Warlock. And I mean, you could say in many respects, maybe the Warlock is already better than some of the other spellcasters. I would disagree. I think having seen them in play and seeing a wizard and a priest be played at the table from level 1 to 9, they are still certainly much more powerful than the Warlock, but the warlock gets to do a lot of stuff because they don't run out of stuff. Something that priests and wizards can do. Anyway, let's have a look here. Jasper. Jasper is a designer around BECME, does a lot of designing of classes and so forth for BECME or basic D&D, and yeah, it's good to have you here. If I became a patron around the time I made the BECME Barbarian, it's been almost 2 years. Yeah, it's been a while. You've been hanging with me for ages, haven't you? Maybe class name could be something like Pact Blade. I think the word Pact Blade may still be a problem. I think it's more around the fact that Pact Blade is still a word that is used by Wizards of the Coast, and even if they don't have a copyright on it or a trade, it's not trademark, but a copyright on it, they would still try to sue me. So I've got to call it something else. That's really where my head was at. So let's go and have a look and see if we can't break down, because we have to trim down that list of patron boons for the Hexblade to be something that would still give you versatility outside of just combat, because its key features right now are primarily combat, and that is not a good design approach, right? You need to have a balance of different things for any class. Even the fighter has things that aren't combat based in Shadowdark. So yeah, interesting process. I'm going to just mark my chat here so I know where we're up to, and let's work our way through the problem and try to solve some of the issues here. And I think the trick to this is going to be looking at what is absolutely essential and what is not absolutely essential. I think that is probably the best thing we can possibly do. So that is what I'm going to try to work my way through right now. So going here, so I'm going to read through the different patron boon effects, and I want you to vote on the ones that either you think you should keep or should be dumped. Because there's a few here that are probably things we could dump. So for example, there is a feature in 5e for the Hexblade that allows you to summon, kind of like summon or create minions, like, I guess, skeleton ghouls or stuff like that, undead things. So I put in a feature that was around that. I thought that was more Hexbladey in nature. I feel like the Hexblade is more, when you think Hex, you think curse. So why I'm thinking in terms of what we do with this is we give them things that are more about not gaining power from a patron, but there's something about them that is much darker. And so we have your body transforms into the shape of a level 2 monster you choose. You don't gain their magical, their stats. You don't gain their special abilities. You simply have the transform into the shape of that monster. So you can pick one. It's a very sort of cosmetic thing. It is a fun aspect. I've found that people who have had it happen have liked the whole idea. That has not been an issue. So being desirable for player characters, not a big issue. But is it absolutely necessary for the Hexblade? I am not convinced that it is. I'm going to mark this in yellow, and you guys will let me know what you think about this. Read all written languages and symbols. Now, I put this in here because that's kind of like comprehend languages. 5e had that. You look at something like Shadowdark, there are aspects to that as well in the game. So, I'm kind of leaning into that. You'll notice too that there is no spell casting check. You simply just know all written languages and symbols. I think that's the difference between a warlock and the likes of a wizard, because wizards are wielding magic that they have learned, whereas Hexblades, just like the Warlock, are wielding magical or magic-like effects that they have not mastered them, they have been granted to them. So that's part of the reason why I kind of structured it that way. I know for some people that might be a little bit, might be a problem, but that's sort of how I sort of looked at it and decided that's how I would structure it. There really isn't a spell right now that allows you to know all languages and symbols. Like, Shadowdark doesn't really have anything like that, which is why I like this one a lot. I think this is a feature we should definitely keep, because it solves a lot of problems for game masters, not just the players. I like features in a class that solve problems for the game master and not just the players. We've got here speak with spirits and undead creatures. Now, speak with undead is it's a tier 3 spell for the priest. Okay, so it's quite a high level feature, but I feel like it fits with sort of the darker nature of the Hexblade and the Warlock, which is why I put it there. But it is a very, it is also very situational. Like, it's not something that comes into play that often. So it is extremely situational. That is another thing to take into consideration. It does fit though with the concept and narrative of the class. Next, as I just mentioned, I put this in here deliberately. Use an action. You're summoning one skeleton or a ghoul for 1 hour each day. There is no spellcasting check. You get to do it once. So if you have it and you get it as part of your roll up, then that's it. I am fine with that staying there. I actually, I don't think it's going to be a big issue myself. I think that is actually fine. So we could definitely keep that, make that more, that distinguishes the Hexblade or the Cursed Blade from the Warlock. That would be a good thing to do, right? Next, read surface thoughts of one undead you can see within near range. Now, I had this reading as something else, so I made this very specific. So read surface thoughts of a creature you can see within near range. Use an action. And I put it in there as use an action because I found that during play testing, people use this all the time. Smart players use this all the time. Just because it's an action, unless you're in combat, you're probably not going to use it. But outside of combat, you use it all the time. It is a no-brainer. So players love using this. I'm not against the idea of it. It certainly gives them an idea of what's going on in the minds of the people around them, at least at the surface level. And it leaves it up to the game master to decide how much information to reveal. But I have designated one undead, whereas maybe it should just read as one creature. That means it's got a bit more versatility to it. Okay. I've got here gain an extra language. Gaining an extra language is all very well, but that's the speaking side of things. We have read all written languages and symbols. Is gaining a language something that is intrinsically tied to being a Hexblade? I feel like that's probably not really. It's more of a wizard thing than it is a Hexblade thing. So I would say this is probably one of those things where maybe we shouldn't consider it. Next, gain advantage on one stat check of your choice. Now, of course, they're probably going to pick Charisma. Okay, it's one stat check. It does not state a spell casting check. It says a stat check. I found this usually means that people get confused and assume that this one stat check could be Charisma, which means that they get advantage on their spellcasting check. This is one of those things where people just get confused and they just don't know how to apply it. This is one of those things where I think maybe this one would be a good one to ditch as well. Next, you apply disadvantage to the next D20 roll a target makes in far range. Use an action. So you would use your action to apply disadvantage to another creature's next D20 roll. this is actually not something that any spells really do. Like, I mean, I suppose you could say Bane would, right? Because this Bless, the Bless spell exists as a pre-spell at tier 2 in Shadowdark. And you think, okay, well, what about Bane? But there is no Bane. There's no Bane spell. Like, it doesn't exist. It is not one of those things. So being able to apply disadvantage to a 20-sided dice roll, it's like cursing somebody. It's basically, this here is the curse. It is not actually part of the Warlock. I put in something completely different. In 9, I gave you access to another, gave you access to a tier 1 wizard spell. This, I think, Hexblade should be a curse. So I put this in here. I want to keep this because I think this is actually smart. The next one, just by the fact that it probably gets used so far by the Warlock in my party more often than not, and that is detect magic effects and properties within near range that are seen. You have to be able to see it. They have to be within near range, which is about 30 feet, and you can figure out whether something's magical or what the properties are as well. It is better. We've found that this has been actually more efficient and better than the detect spell that is cast by our wizard. And that is a tier 1 spell. This feature, even though it is so strong, has been hugely useful. Do you know how much of a fucking pain in the ass it is for somebody to find something that you know as a game master is magical? And you can't tell them because there's detect magic. So unless you ignore the detect magic spell, now at least detect magic doesn't have detect magic and identify. Detect magic in Shadowdark does everything. It does the identifying, it detects it's magical, it does all of that, which is great. Awesome. Fold them all together. Great news. Here's the problem. The wizard casts detect magic, fails the check, and can't cast the spell again until they take a rest. So they're now wandering around with an item which you then have to put a star, say, please put a star beside this. And they're like, okay, that's probably magical. Because if you don't, you as the game master will forget unless you take notes and you don't lose those notes. But the chances are that they won't even realize that they've got it in the first place. So you've got to have some sort of metagame conversation about, look, this is, you probably need to mark down that you picked up this sword or this armor or this book or whatever in a particular room in this adventure, because it's going to be important later on. You've either got to write that down as a game master, or you've got to say something to the players and make sure they make a note of it, so they know to come back and find out. Well, now they know that it's magical even without detecting magic, but they don't know what the properties are, right? Well, this feature here eliminates that entire problem, and I love the fact that it exists as a Warlock feature. Saves so many headaches. You could not convince me not to leave this in. It is staying. The next one here is you don't need to breathe air to survive. Now, I had one here with the Warlock. It is you swim at near speed, so basically you don't slide by swimming, and you can breathe underwater. I went with something similar, but a little different. This feature here, you don't need to breathe air to survive. It is not a combat feature, it is a survival feature. It's actually really useful, potentially in all sorts of situations. So this is another one that I would potentially keep. Next one here is your body transforms into a celestial. It's supposed to be shape of a celestial, diabolic, fey, or primordial of your choice. That doesn't mean you get the stats of the whatever it is. You're not getting their special abilities. You just look like them. So if you're celestial, maybe you look like an angel, which means you might have angel wings, but you don't actually fly. You just have angel wings, or demon or devil wings, or something like that. You just have that form. It is sort of the journey towards whatever your patron's deciding you're going to be. That's kind of where I was going with this. This is another one which I don't think for the Hexblade is absolutely necessary, because I don't feel like they are a full-blown Warlock. So that leaves me with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different features. The ones that are in yellow I think should probably go. That's my thoughts. I still need to ditch one of those features there because the reality is that they're really not needed. It's you know, there's not much point in having them there. So that's another thing. It's like, do we really need to have that there? That's where my head was at. So we're on the way. So now it comes down to you guys and your feedback and your rationale for why maybe we should keep this or ditch that. Because I think the table for the patron boons should not be a 2d6. I think it should be 1d6. You get 6 of them, which means you're probably going to wind up with all of them eventually, particularly if you're rolling every even level, because there's only 5 you can get, so you'll miss out on one of them, but you're eventually going to get all of them, right? Because if you look at even character levels, so that's level 2, level 4, 6, 8, and 10. So you're going to get 5 out of the 6. I don't have a problem with that. I think that's fine. Perfectly happy with that as a concept. So let's go over here. Let's have a look at chat and see what people have had to say. Can you see how complicated and tricky things can get? Oh, Shadowdark seems fun. Shadowdark is fun because Shadowdark is Dungeons and Dragons. Could you have a patron specific ability or a variation of Hexblade for good aligned patrons? Yes, you could, and I've seen people do that already. So Kelsey Dion made a warlock class, I believe, and she had specific abilities aligned for specific patrons. I looked at that very carefully, and what I realized was that what it came down to is the different abilities that the different patrons gave you equated to maybe 6 or 7 different things that were just mixed up in the different patrons. So even though you might have a different table for each of your patrons, essentially what you were dealing with was 6 to 7 different mechanics, which is why I decided in the end it was pointless being focused and worried about certain patrons would give you a certain ability, and that what was probably more important was to focus on what is the underlying thing you're trying to do. That is why I originally for the Warlock created patron boons that consisted of essentially 10 different mechanics. Some which were taken from what Kelsey had done, but a lot of them taken from 5e. And then I added 2 more, which was transforming and changing your form. Because it's cool. It's fun. It's the sort of thing I know people who are playing the Warlock or a Hexblade would like. So that's where I went with this. So in the end, I decided it was unnecessary to worry about that. But I do think you're right in that it would be nice. I think what we need to do is to keep the simplicity down so we don't have too many tables, is to either broaden things out so that it would fit under whatever patron you're dealing with and it won't matter, or it will matter. So I think that's where we lean into it. That would be my solution to solving that problem. Okay, so let's go back. See what you guys have said, and let's just start taking some stuff away, because we have to. If we're going to give them the ability to create a magic weapon for even 3 rounds, it needs to be something that we need to take something away. We can't keep it all. Yep. There's got to be some sacrifice. So let's take away this. I'm going to take away this one. I guess the reason being is I don't think it's absolutely necessary. So we can delete, insert row, delete is a row, column, row, row. Yeah, we'll take that out. We'll take out this one as well. Am I taking out the row? Taking out the row. Delete row. I'm taking that one out as well. Okay, so now we're down to that number. I'm going to take out the extra language and the advantage on the stat check because they're boring. They're really, 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 really boring. They are very mechanical. I've always believed that the best way to approach designing a class is to give you something that's more leans into the narrative of your role play, and this doesn't. It leans into dice mechanics. Extra language, I always liked giving, out an extra language just for a variety of different reasons. But extra language may be sort of like, is it too broad? Is it not too broad? It's one of those things where I am of the opinion that there might be a better way to go. Although, when you look at this one here, speak with spirits and undead creatures. Actually, maybe that is the one that needs to go because that is very specific. That's essentially this one here, and this one here are almost identical in many respects, although there are certain undead creatures that usually don't communicate. So being able to speak to, I guess, a skeleton or a zombie, that wouldn't be a great conversation, but I guess it's kind of the same. Well, let's just take this concept, keep the extra language for now, so I'll undo that, and let's just say this here, since our Hexblade or Cursed Blade is not necessarily evil, and they're not really a full-blown, they're not really the Warlock as such. They're certainly based off the Warlock, but they're not exactly like that. We could take this and let's just remove that. That would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So let's do that. And delete row. Okay. All right. So we have gain an extra language. Read all written languages and symbols. So there's duplication with this one and this one. So reading all written languages and symbols is very, very useful. But then you got extra language, which is sort of kind of doing the same thing. And my thoughts are these two are too similar in nature. Either one or the other has to go, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How many have we got left? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we could get rid of either gain an extra language or read all written languages and symbols. I think we keep the summon the skeleton or ghoul for 1 hour each day until, of course, it's either an hour is expired or you put it into combat and it winds up getting destroyed. It's your little minion. Reading surface thoughts of one creature. Let's just put creature rather than undead. That broadens it out so it's a bit more useful. It is a non-combat feature. This is potentially going to wind up being used as a combat feature. Language is not a combat feature. Disadvantage to the next D20 dice roll in far range is probably going to wind up being a combat feature. Detect magic is not a combat feature, and this one is not a combat feature. So, yeah. But I still, in the original Warlock, there are things that are still considered combat features. Like I would say 9 is a combat feature for the Warlock, right? 9 is definitely, getting another spell. You're probably going to wind up picking up a wizard spell that does damage because you don't have a lot of that going on. The next one I would say is transforming into a small animal for 1 hour. It's probably not a combat one. You can use speak with spirits and undead creatures as a combat feature because you can eliminate the potential to actually have to engage in a battle. So that's 2. Transforming your body into these different forms, potentially you've essentially kind of got a permanent disguise that might get you past demons and devils because you look like them. But we don't have that anymore, so that would be 4. So we had a lot in the last one. I guess the reality is we've got one one here, which I think is the Summon the Skeleton or Ghoul, which is a combat one. And we've got one which is you apply disadvantage to the next d20 dice roll at far range. That's a combat one. The rest of them, they're not really combat. They're non-combat features. So I actually don't have a problem. It is the gain an extra language or read all written languages and symbols. One of those has got to go, in my opinion. And I still think it would be on par with our existing Warlock and the other classes that Shadowdark has. So, yes, we're paring it down. We're getting there. We're getting closer. What have people got to say? Apply Vampiric Touch to Blade. No, we've already got Magic Blade. We've got Magic Weapon. Magic Weapon is going to do what we need it to do. I don't think we need to have anything more. I wouldn't do anything more with Blade. I think, remember, it's not 5e. It is Shadowdark. Like most spellcasters, if you've got a full-blown spellcaster in Shadowdark, this is how they structure them. So this is how you have to think about building a Shadowdark class, right? We've talked about designing for 5e classes. We've done that in the past here. But this is how it works. You get one feature as a full-blown spellcaster in Shadowdark, and then you can cast spells. That's it. Nothing else. That's it. That's how it works. But if you're not a spellcaster, like you're a thief or a fighter, you will probably get 2 or 3 features. So you've got backstab as a thief, and then you've got thievery. But thievery is such a broad thing. It does lots and lots of different things. Thievery does 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 different things. 5. Yeah. 5 different things. Which I essentially say is kind of like the patron boons for the Hexblade that we're creating. It's essentially giving you about, the only difference is instead of giving you access to all those things all at once, which would be a bit much, you're randomly selecting which one you get given by your patron, okay? But the thief gets a lot of things that they can do, so they're not going to be lost for things to do. And then the fighter actually gets 3 different things. They get weapon mastery, which makes them better at fighting because they're a fighter. They don't cast spells. They get hauler, which means they can carry more stuff. Not a combat feature, but very useful, particularly in this game. And then they get grit, which means they can choose strength or dexterity, and you have advantage on checks of that type for doing certain things. So that's not really a combat feature. That is a non-combat feature. That's for exploration. So that's sort of where my head is at with all of that. I'd keep the read all written, okay. Translation check instead of automatic read and write. No, and you know why I've not done that? There's a reason why there is no check required. Because it's not a spell. And what we're trying to do, I guess, and it's not really magic. It's not like they are casting magic spells. The Warlock and the Hexblade they have a couple of things they do where they do cast a spell, but those things aren't. They're kind of like gifted magical effects. I think these boons are too close to the Warlock. The Hexblade seems more combat orientated than the Warlock, so I'd look at this idea about imbuing the weapon with specific abilities. I disagree. There is enough combat stuff in the Hexblade already. If we lean into more combat stuff with the Hexblade, there's no point making it. I wouldn't even bother putting into Shadowdark. It's not doing enough stuff. I don't think it is that. I mean, you got to remember that the Hexblade subclass is very similar to the Warlock anyway. I think what we do is let's keep the you can read all written languages and symbols, and we'll get rid of the extra language. As you mentioned, I'm fine with that. We'll do that. That gets us down to 6. And they are, there is differences. Some are similar, but they're not exactly the same. The only ones that are exactly the same, so if we take this one out, let's get rid of this, delete this row. Out of six, which are exactly the same. Read all written languages and symbols, there's one. Read surface thoughts, there's two. Okay. Detect magical effects and properties within near range, that's three. Half of them are taken directly from the Warlock table. The other half are actually different. They are actually different. So, yeah, I think that's probably the better way to go about doing it. Giving them more combat stuff is would just feed into the power gaming nature of my home group and whoever else you have at a table. Like, that is not Shadowdark. The idea is not to feed the optimization, min-maxer, and power gamer community. Shadowdark isn't really built to do that. That is, if you want that, you go play Pathfinder, you go play the likes of 5e or 2024 5e, or you even potentially go and play something like Draw Steel or was it the Daggerheart game? I don't know that Daggerheart game kind of falls into that bracket. A Daggerheart is another animal in itself. Yeah. Anyway, I've played Daggerheart, by the way. So yeah, I think that's probably a better way to approach it. So that's what I'm going to do. Whether I'm right or wrong, I'll only be able to tell once people start trying it out and seeing how they feel about the whole thing. But that's what I would do for now. And now, let's deal with titles. This is the worst bit. Honestly, trying to get titles, 15 titles, 5 for lawful, 5 for chaotic, and 5 for neutral. Always the worst part of designing a class in Shadowdark. I can tell you right now, it's my least favorite place to go. So this is not a warlock. This is something else. We need to have not a warlock, as a sort of like a cursed, a cursing. It's not a curse, but a cursing spellcaster who gains mystical. Okay, a cursed spellcaster. It's not really even a spellcaster. It's something else. I'm not sure how I want to structure this at all. I might come back to that. And sort it out a little bit later. But yeah, the gains magical through from a powerful being. And wields through a weapon. But I want to put power. I want to put something else here. Something like that. Might have changed that a little bit more, but anyway, let's go down and cursed warrior, cursed blade, cursed. Cursed blade. Okay, all right. Let's deal with the next aspect of this, which is hex titles. Since we've got We've got our weapons, which may need to get reviewed. We'll see how this goes. We've got our armor, we've got our hit points, we've got our magic weapon feature, we've got our packed boons, how they work, we've got our Eldritch Blast. I might move Eldritch Blast, its position, and go cut, and just put that under here, under the weapon. Paste. Oh, did I bulge that up a little bit? Okay, all right, so that's that. And then if I go down, push that down there. Okay, so we'll just rearrange that. We've got that done, we've got that done. We've got our talent table, which I think covers all the things. I think that the talents need to lean more into the melee aspect rather than the spellcasting aspect. So we've got that done, and then we've got our different boons, which is really our utility aspect of our character. It does have some combat stuff there, but not a lot. Next, titles. Right, this will be interesting. What the heck do I call something that's around hexes? Like this is not the easy part. I tell you right now. If you think that the easy part is coming up with titles for the classes, it is the worst part, just because you've got to come up with so many. Here we go. So, Carell. Did I just skip past this? Did I read all of this? Did I catch up? I'm thinking these boons are too close to... No, we're going to keep going. What's the difference between the Hexblade and the Warlock? The difference between a Hexblade and a Warlock, since a Hexblade is just a type of Warlock, really, in many respects, the difference is that they create or can have a magical weapon. They can create a magical weapon. They can turn their blade into a magical weapon. Warlocks can't do that. That's not what the Warlock does, but the Hexblade does this. Yeah? That's the difference. That is really the fundamental and major difference. Remember, Hexblade is just a subclass of Warlock. It really is. I wouldn't like it in any system. It's too much of a one-trick pony. It is. Look, so Jasper, it is a one-trick pony. There's a reason why my poll asked the question, should you even consider creating a Hexblade class for Shadowdark? The only reason I made it is because my players, I have a couple of players, one in particular, who would really like to play a Hexblade and wanted to know what would a Hexblade in Shadowdark feel like in play. And so I said, let me have a go and see if I can make it. So I wrote down on a piece of paper here, this is my piece of paper, right? I wrote down all my notes very quickly in terms of what I would try to do. And the thing that comes up every single time is I needed to change the patron boons, and I did. I've changed about half of them are different. And then I also needed to make sure that some sort of magic blade or magic weapon was a factor for them. That was what I leaned into very much for them. That was part and parcel of that design process. So you don't need to have a Hexblade in Shadowdark and you would be fine. You don't like it as an archetype, it steps too much on the Warlock. I agree. Again, I'm doing this primarily because I have a player in my group who would like to have access to a Hexblade in Shadowdark. These things suck. They do. I still need to do it. I'm going to figure out how to do it fairly quickly. So what do you were saying is you mediate on text and patrons gives you translation, or it just translates in your mind automatically. Yes. So Calrel, when I'm talking about the feature and the patron boons, and it says here, read all written languages and symbols as a patron boon for a Hexblade, or if it was for a Warlock. What I mean is, if you see any kind of text or symbolization, you know and automatically understand what it is. That's what it's doing. You're not casting a spell it is built into your brain. It's built into you. It is part of you now. It is not like a wizard who has to try to control the magical forces. There's an aspect to the warlock and the hexblade that is transformation. Sometimes that transformation is physical, transforming into maybe a monster, transforming into maybe a celestial or an angel or a demon or a devil or a fae or something like. There's a transformation in body, but there's also a transformation in mind. And that is what that feature is supposed to try to duplicate Kal-Rel. Does that make sense? I'm trying to picture a hexblade and warlock in one of our live plays. What would make either class stand out from the other to a bystander? That's a good point. And the only thing that's really going to stand out is the fact that the hexblade can make a magical weapon for a short period of time, whereas the warlock can't do that. That's the thing that you're going to probably only notice. The rest of it, you may not even notice the difference. But often that is the case with Shadowdark. Like the differences are very subtle sometimes. Can channel touch-based spells through blades. So Kal-Rel, I can't do that one. So Kal-Rel, the reason why I can't create a feature for the Hexblade that channels magical spells through a blade is because they asked me to make a Blade Singer class. So that means I now have to figure out how to make a class that casts spells and uses a sword without it making better than the fighter and better than the wizard, which is a hard ask. So that's why I'm not putting it into the Hexblade, because I think the Hexblade is a very different animal, really. Although the differences between the warlock and them they're not huge. So if you are looking for that concept, Kal-Rel, it's coming in the future. God help me. Pray for me in all the forms you can. If you believe in more than one deity or have more than one religion, please use all of them for me, because I will need it. Use angelic terms for lawful, but guardian, angel, cherubim. Okay, Seraph. I see where you're going with this. Oh, I see. That's actually not a bad idea. That's for the titles. Jasper, you're a lifesaver. That might actually work. That is a very good idea for lawful. Hello, Nacho Man. Nacho Man is a patron, and it's been a while, mate. I hope that your life is not as complicated as it was the last time we spoke, because I know it's been utterly nuts and crazy and hard to manage. Change my vote to no for Shadowdark. And I totally get it, Jasper. I totally understand it. Again, the reason I'm making the Hexblade is because I've got one or two players who wanted me to make one. Okay. I like Watcher and maybe Nerafin as well. Okay. All right. Interesting. Just to give the magic weapon as a talent or boon to the warlock. No, the reason why it's not a talent or a boon is because you would randomly either get it or not get it. The magic weapon aspect has to be baked in at the very beginning with no chance of either maybe getting it or maybe not getting it. It has to be, it is the central aspect of the whole Hexblade. That's why it is there. That's why I did it that way. Now, back to your suggestion around dealing with the titles. I think that is some brilliant stuff. Angelic terms just seems like a super smart idea. Angelic terms. I love that. That is awesome. And it's quite fitting too. It's definitely fitting. Let's see if we can't make that happen. Let's go over here. And if we go angelic terms, celestial, and you had a couple here already that you had picked, and I think it's just going to be coming down to the order in terms of laying them out, right? So if we take, what's the order that you had? Guardian Angel. I guess, is it the, it's not angelic terms, it's angelic hierarchy, isn't it? Hierarchy. I think that's what we're after. We want the angelic hierarchy. What is the hierarchy of the angels? Okay, so that's probably going to work quite nicely, and we can do that we can do that for demons or devils as well. Ooh, I like it. Nice job. Jasper is a lifesaver. Let's deal with this. We should be able to do this quite quickly, that means. Even though I've been talking a long time about why I even started the Hexblade in the first place. Okay, so let's see. If we go lawful, like you suggest, which essentially means lawful being good or angelic in nature, the ranking of angels, those higher ranking possessing greater power and authority. So the highest order is a seraphim. Let's go with seraphim. I think that's yeah, seraphim we'll put at the top. So let's copy that, put that at the very bottom of our title. So I need to put that in there. Seraphim. Good. Okay, next one. That's considered the highest order. Then cherubim. Associated with wisdom, knowledge. Okay, so let's go with cherubim. Copy. Paste. Okay, cool. What's the next one? Throns. Oh, second hierarchy. Oh, so this is first hierarchy. Oh, I see. So this is, all right. Okay, so what we want are domains, virtues, powers. Third hierarchy. Oh. Archangels. I mean, it doesn't need to be exactly different cherubs. Yeah. Throns. Let's do that. Thron. Let's go with Thron. Paste it. Put a capital in there. And then Angel. And then Archangel. Domains, powers, riches. So yeah, we'll kind of go that way. Archangel. Okay, so we got, I don't know if that sort of Archangel. Yeah. Okay. All right. Can we do the same thing with demons or devils or something like that? It would be devils rather than demons. Devil. And their hierarchy is lemures, imps, spine devils. This is demonic. Not devils. Demonic. Okay, let's see if we can make this work. Is it going to just give me D&D stuff? I don't know, it might. Oh, it's literally giving me demonic as being kings, princes, dukes. Dear. That's hellishly funny. Here we go. It's not really demon nobility. Prince, duke. Oh, okay. King, prince, king, queen, prince, princess, duke, this is going to be a little bit weird, isn't it? Because it's going to feel very sort of feudal system like. Is that going to be a solution? I don't know that that's going to be a good idea. I can see a lot of people getting very upset. I'm not really against making people upset, frankly, but yeah, no, I got Seraphim in the right place. You are correct. Hierarchy was what I meant. Your movements while fighting form geometric sigil shapes or combo shapes to cast spells. What you're describing is way too complicated for Shadowdark, Calrel. It might work in something like 5e or Pathfinder, but it's not. It won't work. What you're describing, I know almost exactly what you're talking about, but I don't think it can be designed easily. Archons. What's Archon? Let's take Archon. Sounds awesome. I don't know. Do we want that word as Archon? Archon is a ruler of the material world, often depicted as a malevolent beings that impose souls and prevent them from returning to the spiritual realm. Okay. That might be a little bit difficult to make happen. Yeah, that might be a little bit difficult to make happen. What's another? Demonic hierarchy is going to just wind up being the feudal system, which may just go down really badly. So maybe I should look at something else. Can we go here? Okay, that's not going to work either. This is going to be much harder than I thought. Devil, demon, archdemon, lord, archlord for the chaos. Archon is Greek for ruler. Archon would be one of the highest for neutral. Archon. Is that the actual meaning of Archon? As fallen angels. These Archons are said to be the angels that rebelled against the true God and were cast out of heaven. Okay. Okay, well, let's put Archon in neutral, because they're obviously not there, but maybe they're not full-blown the other way. So let's put them at the top, like you suggest. Archon. And then, of course, we've got to fill in the rest of it, which is going to be a little bit more difficult. But, okay, so, yeah. So we've got that so far. I feel like lawful is fine. Chaotic and neutral is going to be something else. Can we lean into curse or hex? Because I feel like lawful and going the angelic way was actually a smart way to go. But we can, with chaos, maybe we can go with hex or curse and get just different words for hex or curse that sort of fall into that. Because hexing and cursing, they're obviously bad things, right? Generally, they're used for bad things. So maybe that is another way of dealing with that aspect of it. I'm not entirely sure if it's the best way, but I don't know that I want to necessarily put down devil, demon, archdemon, lord. Okay, to chat. I wish there was a raised hand thing. Yeah. Nephilim would be neutral, along with Watcher. Nephilim, would it? Is Nephilim? Hex and curse synonyms were lame. Were they? Oh, you've already tried it. Well, maybe we just need to lean full-blown into into the old demonic titles. Nephilim. Let's put in Nephilim and see what I get. This is Nephilim meaning. What does that mean? The term Nephilim in the Bible refers to a mysterious group of beings or people often described as giants who existed before and after the great flood. The name is derived from the Hebrew word nepel, meaning to fall, and sometimes translated to fallen ones. Nephilim are described as the offspring of the sons of God. Okay, and daughters. I see where this is going here. I see why you've selected that word. It actually makes a lot of sense. I know where this is leading. So Nephilim, actually probably not a bad idea at all. So Nephilim could go next. We'll put that in there. Nephilim. And then you had something else there too, didn't you? If I remember right. Just go with the demon stuff. Yeah. It'll just go feudal stuff. The feudal titles. Watcher. I think we've got there. Person who observes. Watcher. We could call them Watcher. Why not? Neutral. Let's go. How about Fallen? Fallen and Hexu. We'll just put them as Hexu for neutral, and then we'll go through and just do King/Queen. What was the next one? King, Queen, Prince, Princess. God, they were awful. It is a terrible hierarchy to be using, but I get it. Not my favorite at all. Dukes, lesser demons, princes, dukes. Okay, so let's go here and see if I can't bring it. I'm going to bring this across and show you what I'm up to. So I'm taking Jasper's advice, since titles are a pain in the butt. We've gone with Fallen. Since it's neutral, they're sort of fallen out of favor from lawful. So, but they're not full-blown evil. Hexer, Watcher, Nephilim, Archon. And I feel like these ones, as you go further up, they move further away from just being falling out of favor to more being on the fence. I guess that's what we're doing here. So next, let's go with, is it Duke or Duchess? Duke or Duchess? I think it's something like that. Duke, Duchess. Duke, Duchess. I think that's right. Duke, Dutch, Duke, Duchess. I have a problem. I've got a player in my group who would play this class just so they get these titles. Earls. Knights, Hellborn Demons, Sinners. A Sinner. I kind of like that. Let's just put in Sinner. It's the lowest rank. Sinner. Paste. Sinner. And then the next one would be something like a knight or an earl. What is... I don't understand what this word is. I need to find out. So let's put that in. It is a nobleman rank above count and below duke. Oh, I see. All right, so no, that's not right. So it's basically, let's go Earl. Let's go Earl. What's the female version of Earl? Is there a female version of Earl or not? I don't know. Female Earl. Countess. Count or countess. That's an easy way. That's what we'll do. We won't go Earl. Count or countess. Countess. Count. I think that's right. Boom, boom, boop, 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 boop. I think that is. Has that got us through most of that nonsense? I think it has. Ranks of demons. Yeah. Rank L. Lord. All right. Counts, countess. Dutch. Duke, Duchess, Prince, Princess. Okay, all right. I think I think that's the extent of my creative input in terms of titles. I don't think I want to do too much more with that. It's a painful process. At least we've spent 17 minutes on that nonsense. You're getting to the party late, Fred Huber? Not really. You're all good. Messenger, Watcher, Fallen, Nephilim, Arkan. I see where you'd go. Okay, all right. I've kind of got some of those in there. Hexer, Messenger. I kind of like Messenger. Fallen, yeah. Messenger over Hexer. Let's do that, because if I remember right, I probably used Hexer in the Warlocks titles, but Messenger I haven't used. Messenger. Is that Messenger? Did I get it right? Messenger. God, I hope so. I think I got the basic gist of that. Okay, let's review before I have to go to work. Let's review what we've done and see if there's anything that I suspect that this is going to need a lot more revamping and readjusting for it to work successfully. My opinion of doing like a Cursed Blade or Hexblade, since it is not something that I would have picked as a thing to do, but it's more of a thing that one of my players would like to have in the game, is more about trying to make sure that I don't overshadow the likes of the fighter, the wizard, the priest, or even the warlock that I created for the game system. And I'm not too sure if that can be done and still be different enough. So I'm going with magic weapon. I'm not giving them any ranged weapons whatsoever. Okay, they're all melee weapons. So the only way they can do a ranged attack is with the Eldritch Blast, which is a spell, and their magic weapon is a spell. Is two. They get only two spells. And they don't need to worry about having to take a rest to get them back, because unlike wizards and priests, their patron doesn't turn the tap off. If they turn off the tap, they won't be able to do nothing, which is not something we're going to do with the class, because that's just a dick move on my part, or any game master, frankly. So, so we'll just leave it as it is there, I think. To succeed, beam, da-da-da. That is different enough. We've got spell casting, we've got melee. Choose a talent. I think that's different enough. This is really where it lies, is the boon effects. Making sure that the boon effects are different enough to what has already been done compared to what the Warlock has got. So this is half the list that the Warlock has. So it's half the choices. So you get a lot less. And the reason for that is because you get magic weapon, which Warlocks don't get at all as a spell. And you can fail that spell casting check, magic weapon. But what we get that is different is that you don't need to breathe air to survive. So there's something weird going on there, right? But that's not a combat feature. That is definitely a feature that could be useful underwater or in an airless environment. I believe there are times where it would be useful. Is there something that could be put in there that would be even more different to what has already been put into the Warlock class that I created? Possibly. Detect magic is very, very similar. But again, you couldn't convince me to take it out because it is so useful to have as a game master. It just alleviates so many hassles, particularly when you've got people who are trying to cast, detect magic and they fail it. I almost feel like the class, the wizard, ditch having extra languages and just give them detect magic so that they don't even have to turn it on and off. Like, they just do it. Like, when I think about the core rules, I honestly almost feel like don't give the wizard more languages. No. That's not what they need. Give them a spell that allows them to know more languages. That's fine. Now, what you really need to do is just let them be able to identify that something is magical and what their magical effect is. And that would just make life so much easier. I think that's more of a core thing. But we've built it in here, since I'm not going to rebuild the wizard for Shadowdark. This is different. The disadvantage on the next d20 dice roll a target makes at far range. It's like cursing them, so that's different. That nobody else has got that. And we've got the summon the skeleton or ghoul, which is different. The read surface thoughts one is I left it in. It's just because I've noticed that the player that uses it as the warlock loves using it and uses it a lot, and it has furthered in an adventure or moved the adventures on. More often than not, it moves them further forward. It alleviates. It's not like they can figure out everything that something is thinking, but at least the surface thoughts are picked up, which are often completely obvious by their facial expression. So I don't feel like they feel good about it, but I don't feel like I'm giving them that much more. Do you know what I mean? And they feel satisfied with that whole process. So it's an interesting one. I don't know that this table is perfect in any way, shape or form. I'm happy with about half of it, or just over half of it, and the other bits maybe need a bit of tinkering. Titles, we've got them done, but yeah, they're a pain in the butt. They really are. And it'll get worse every time we make a class. You're going to hear me whining about trying to figure out what to do with the titles for the new class we deal with. Thank you. Back's hurting. Need to lay down. No problems. Okay, you just listen, mate. That's all good. My Beck Me Magic user remake has detect magic 3 times a day. Yeah, if I had my way, I would just put it as unlimited. Change Sinner to Baron. You reckon? Change Sinner to Baron. Why Baron? Oh, Baron as in, I know, now I know what you're talking about. Yes, Baron. Yeah, Baron, Count, Countess, Duke, Duchess, Prince, Princess, King, Queen. Yeah, no, I get it. Makes perfect sense. Absolutely. We go full-blown feudal. We go full-blown feudal. Because let's get real. Barons are sinners. Like, was there ever a good baron? Baron is the lowest order of UK peerage. Also the lowest form of human being, frankly. Baron is synonymous with being a complete dictator and dick. So yes, Baron, Baroness. Oh, that's right. I've got to put in the other one. Baroness. I think that's right. I think, yeah, I got it. Okay, so I got both of them. Baron, Baroness. And G.I. Joe. Yeah. Nice. Okay, so we did it. We did a Hexblade. Oh my God. I'll tell you. Cajun, you owe me big for this. You really do. Okay. Do you think Shadowdark RPG needs a Hexblade class? Yes, 33%. Undecided, 25%. Just watching, 25%. No, 16%. You know, if I was voting, I'd probably be in the 16%. I'd be probably saying no. And I'm the one who just made the damn thing out of 12 votes. But the reality is, if you want to play Hexblade, you now have the tools to do it. Because I'll put this up onto Patreon in the paid tier. It'll be up there at the end of the week, like I do in pretty much every week. That'll make number 4. We've done 3 in these live streams. That'll make number 4. And God help me, will I survive getting through this entire list? I don't know, but I'll tell you now, it is a feat. It's a feat of is it love? Is it insanity? I don't know what it is. It's definitely one of those things, but I think it's crazy because I've still got to do the knight. I don't know why that's got to do the knight or cavalier, the swashbuckler. God knows how that's supposed to work. The battle master, I feel like I've got a better grip about how to do the battle master than anything else. So I'm not afraid of doing the battle master. I'm actually all right with the idea. Frankly, I think that could be done without it being a pain. The ninja, kind of got an idea how to deal with that, but not really. I know that it's going to be stealth involved and sort of assassination, but yeah, how do I build that mechanically for Shadowdark? I've got to do the War Mage, which I feel like is just asking for trouble. And I feel like the War Mage and the Blade Singer are so similar. Like, how do I make them different? Like, I don't know how that's supposed to work. I know that somebody's going to want me to do the Blade Singer. The Blade Singer, of course, is really popular in 5e and previously because it's overpowered. It also lives up to there's a lot of fiction books out there that sort of have that Blade Singer, you're a spellcaster but you use a blade sort of thing going on. So I think Simon wanted the Battle Rager, which was basically somebody who wears spiked armor. It's like throw yourself at somebody and injure them that way. The Eldritch Knight just feels like an attempt to go, can I wear plate armor and cast spells? So I don't know how that's supposed to work. I don't know how that's going to work at all. It just feels like another blaming paladin. I've already made a paladin. The Arcane Trickster, like a thief spellcaster. I don't know. The Expert, I don't know how to do that, but I like that idea more than the other things that have been put forward to me to try to do. I think the Expert is a much more interesting concept. But anyway. Fun as always, I want a Battle Cat class for Shadowdark RPG. Are you serious? What the hell would a Shadowdark Battle Cat class look like? What is that even called? It can't be called Battle Cat. What is it called? Is that the Cavalier? Is that the Knight? Is it what? Mounted what? Mounted Warrior? Is that what you're talking about? Mounted Warrior? It's on the list, buddy. It's on the list. I don't know. He's probably he's joshing with me, people. He's just pulling my leg, sort of. Anyway, that's me. So I normally say in these live streams when I'm making stuff, It's easy to do. I've shown you how to do it. Go for it. Make it yourself. Blah, 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 blah. But I'm not going to kid you that the more classes you make for any game system, it doesn't matter whether it's Shadowdark or it's Dungeons and Dragons 5e, whether it's 2014 or 2015 or Pathfinder, the harder and harder it will get until you find yourself kind of peeing on everybody else's little bit of the pie, and it just becomes really difficult to do. But I'm hoping that by doing these live streams and you see me suffer and agonize over how to do it and put forward different ideas, and people in the chat put forward different ideas, you'll figure out how to solve your impossible problems. That is my hope for these live streams, that you'll be able to figure out how to solve your impossible problems, because they are going to get more difficult. Next week will be hard. The week after will be harder. It will just get tougher and tougher. Do not expect it to get easier. So, yeah. I imagine this might be one of those times, it's happened before, that you might actually see me have a mental breakdown in a live stream on YouTube, because that has happened a few times, and that could happen doing this. So we'll be back next week to see if we can break me, and if that happens and the channel disappears, you'll know why. Dear. Okay, so huge thank you to everybody who's been watching and listening. I want to thank everybody who commented in the chat, but specifically those people who were taking part in the poll, 12 of you who did. Thank you so much. Huge thank you to Jasper, who has been very, very helpful today. Calrel, Fred Huber, who was here, Nacho Man, who managed to pop in just briefly, but frankly, we would not have gotten as far as we did if it hadn't been for, oh, here we go, Era DL. I almost forgot about Era. He was here initially, but we would not have gotten as far if it wasn't for Jasper and Calrel. Let's be honest. Like, if it wasn't for them in the chat, we would not have gotten as far as we did. Fred could have gotten stuck, or you could have wound up with something that was much more shite. Right now, I don't feel like we've got shite. We have a first draft. Okay? So, huge thank you to all of my patrons who support me in the paid tier. Okay? I really do appreciate you. Without you, I would not be here. It's as simple as that. And wherever you are in the world, whether it be the morning, the afternoon, or the night, please look after yourself, your family, and your friends. Be nice to your neighbours. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s.